Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back. Just want to make sure it's recording. It is. So we are now moving on to the practical side of things. So here I'm going to show you how to use Eviews and run data analysis as discussed in the previous videos in Eviews. Now the first step, of course, is to get your data into Eviews. Typically I will present the data in an Excel file, and then you need to go and import that data into Eviews. If you open Eviews without data, it just gives you a blank slate. So let me give you an example of how it looks. You'll open your Eviews and you'll just have this, right? And so we need to import data into this. But before we do that, important to quickly have a look at our data. Okay, there's a few things that we have to look at before we make use of our data. Number one, we have to order our data from the oldest to the newest date. All the models that we use in econometrics, all the models that we use in empirical finance assumes that your data is from the oldest to the newest. So make sure of that. If that's not the case, so if you use a data source where you extract data and the data is from the newest to the oldest, then you have to transpose it. I assume you know how to do this. As I've said, we assume a certain level of Excel knowledge. If not, YouTube is your friend. Go and have a look at how to transpose data. But make sure that your data, number one, is from the oldest to the newest. In this case, we can see it's January, February, March from 2002 onwards. And so we can see that it is from the oldest to the newest. The second thing is we can see it's monthly data. We have to know what the frequency is that we are working with. So you can see it's month on month. So typically what this will mean is that these represent the closing prices of, or the closing values at least, of each of our variables at the end of the month. The closing prices of these variables. Okay? Very important, the second very important thing to remember is that all your variables needs to have the same data frequency and the same time horizon. In other words, we cannot use data where some of the variables are daily and some quarterly and some monthly and some yearly and so on and so forth. We typically have to make sure that our data or the frequency of our variables corresponds with one another. This typically is a problem or a challenge when we work with share price data, which typically have daily data points, but then with macroeconomic variables that's either monthly or quarterly. Okay, you can imagine that that is a problem. So what we'll typically do is we need to select the frequency, the lowest frequency, or the variable with the lowest frequency. For example, our macroeconomic data like CPI that's released only monthly. And then we have to convert our share price data to monthly data. We can do this when we extract our data from Equity RT. I'm going to show you how to do that in our live session, our physical live session during our next class in February. Okay? But in principle, same frequency and the same range. And then we can quickly go and have a look at our variables. This is it's US variables. We've got our Standard and Poor, our Ford share price, General Electric, Microsoft, Oracle, the US Treasury bill 3 months. So that's our rate on our US Treasury bill, typically considered as a fairly low risk asset and a good proxy for interest rates in the US. Also a good risk proxy and a monetary policy proxy. And then don't worry too much about our dummy variable currently, or at this point we're going to use this only in our next video, or not next video, next class. Okay, and then last thing is to make sure that we don't have missing data points. So quickly have a look at your data set. Make sure it's complete, that there's no blanks, because if you've got a blank when you import it in Eviews and when you run your model, you are going to get an error sign. Now, very important, as a MCOM finance student, sometimes you will get errors in Eviews, and it is a bit of a trial and error process. Okay, it's not always obvious what the error is. you will have to go through a diagnostic process. That's sometimes the tedious part of a quantitative data analysis. Now, very often the problem sits with your data in Excel. Okay, so if you import your thing and something doesn't want to work or something doesn't look right, the first thing you do is go to your Excel spreadsheet and just make sure that everything is there again. Okay, of course, if that's not the problem, there's a different problem, and we'll have a look at that as we proceed in empirical finance. So once we've done that, and once we are happy with our data, we can import it into Excel. Eviews. So the way to do that is to go to the Excel file that contains the data that you would like to import. You right click on it and you open with Eviews. You will then be presented with this screen. It asks us the predefined range. This is only applicable if we've got more than one tab in our Excel spreadsheet. In this case, we only had one tab. The tab's name was table, so we can only choose this tab, right? But if we work with an Excel spreadsheet with more than one tab, we can choose which tab we want to import. Okay, you can only import one tab at a time. So, happy with that, change nothing else, you just say finish. Now, note that some of you, depending on how you installed your Eviews, might get an error pop up or a warning pop up at this point in time. Just say, okay, that's nothing, that's no problem. It gives that sometimes, just ignore that, just say, okay, go on. Then you'll get this. It doesn't really matter whether you say yes or no. If you say yes, what does is it just, as you update your Excel file, it automatically updates your Eviews. Okay? In other words, if you make a change in your Excel file that's been imported here, it will automatically make the change in Eviews. If you say no, it's a static file, and even if you've changed something in your Excel file, it won't change in Eviews. Now, I prefer to just say no. Just sometimes you go back to your Excel file, you make a few changes, but you don't necessarily want those changes to be implemented immediately into Eviews. I would rather just import my stuff again. So make my changes, import it again, but that is your choice. Okay? And there you have it. Here's all my variables as you've seen it in your Excel file. A good rule of thumb, or a good practice rather, not a rule of thumb, good practice, is to quickly have a look at some of your variables just to make sure everything imported correctly. Go and have a look at your date. We've got 2002, month 1, 2002, month 2, so on and so forth. This corresponds with what we had in our Excel file. We've got monthly data. The sequencing is correct, so we're happy with that. You can also scroll down to see if there's no missing data points. And it seems like this variable was imported correctly. We can go and have a look at all these variables in a group as you would have in the Excel file by clicking on or holding in control and then clicking on all the variables that you want to see in a group. So we've got our dummy variable, Ford, General Electric, Microsoft, Oracle, Standard & Poor, and our treasury rate. Just forget about the residual now. We'll discuss the residual in our first class in Feb. That's not important for this. So you click on all your variables and then you right click and open with a group. And there you'll see all your variables as they appear in your Excel spreadsheet. You'll see the order is a little bit different. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. The order that you see here is just the order in which you clicked in your document, but in essence it's the same thing. Doesn't really matter in which cell it appears. I'm going to have a look at that, and this of course needs to be a mirror image of your Excel file, except of course for the order of this doesn't matter, but everything else needs to be a mirror image. Your dates, oldest to newest, you'll see it there, the actual values, the actual variables, so make sure that is correct. You can close this and save the group if you want to, and you'll see it should be, I think I did not save it as a group because I should have given it a name, but don't worry. Okay, let me quickly do that. Just quickly do that again. Open as a group. So you'll close it there. Name your group. Call it group 1. And there you've got your group. So if you do want to go back again, you just double click on that. And then you've got your data in Eviews, and then you can run with it.